friends, welcome to today's video where I will be showing you guys how to make a floral besom, just in time for Samhain. This besom can be used for symbolic decorative purposes or actual use. I'm using actual broom making supplies, so this can actually be useful for sweeping up your altar both energetically but also physically. I know besoms are a ritual tool that aren't meant for actual sweeping, but this tutorial can be useful for making a real broom and this symbolic besom as well. You can even make two if you wanted to. You will need to get your hands on some broom corn for this project. I'm using processed broom corn, meaning that the thicker stem end has been cut off, which is more useful for making larger brooms with decorative handles. This processed broom corn is better for making smaller whisk brooms. The former involves some more complicated techniques, and I'm no broom making expert, so this broom corn has a smoother side and this crinkled side, which is going to be the bottom end of the broom. You're also going to need some twine and some wood for the handle of this besom. I'm using mango, but the traditional wood for a besom is birch. You can use whatever you have where you live, and also some dried flowers. You can also use fresh, but just remember you're going to want to hang the besom upside down to let it dry, and you can also use some fresh herbs. I'm using black sage here, but you can use rosemary or any other herb that holds well once it's dried. Now let's start making this broom. You're going to want to size up the size of your branch to the size of the broom corn and just measure off about how much of the broom corn you're going to want to cut. If you wanted to leave it whole, just get a much larger branch, but I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a smaller sort of whisk type handheld besom. So I'm cutting off about 6 inches of the broom corn. And you're going to want to do this in small pieces because if you try and do it all in one chunk, it's going to leave the edges pretty ragged. Here I'm just making sure that the cut end of the broom corn are all flush and that there's no ragged edges so they look even when you wrap it around the stick. Here I am sizing up the length of the broom corn to the stick, and if you're actually going to want to use this for sweeping purposes, you want it to be very sturdy, so I would put the stick into the broom corn at least 4 to 6 inches, and I didn't like the length of my stick. It's a little bit short, so I decided to cut the broom corn just a little bit more. Otherwise, the handle would have looked way too small for the broom corn. And now, this is a much better length. Try and get the stick perfectly centered in the broom corn. If you have it a little bit off-centered, it's just gonna look a little bit lumpy, but that's okay. This part can be a little bit frustrating if this is your first time making a broom, so take as much time as you need to really adjust the length of the broom handle and where the broom corn sits. If you want to perfectly center your stick in the middle and just adjust the top part of the broom corn so that it sits flush so there's no parts sticking up, really take your time here. And this is a little difficult to do without having someone help you or have some kind of tension sort of device, because when you're making brooms you usually use this sort of stick that the twine wraps around by your feet to hold the tension so you can really pull up on that string and get a tight grip on the broom corn. But since we're doing this all by hand with no other tools, and this is a little difficult to do on camera also, but just really try and work the broom corn together right here and then tighten it as much as you can into a single knot, and you can flip the broom over and tie a knot on the other side as well. Once you get that knot pulled as tightly as possible, you can start winding your twine around the broom, and you're going to want to do this as tight as possible. Just make sure the broom corn or your stick isn't moving too much while you're doing this, so sometimes you'll want to stop and adjust just to make sure everything's still in place, but just tie it as tightly as possible and just continue to wind around about 40 or 50 times or however many times it takes until it feels very sturdy to you. I forgot to mention earlier in the video, but when you're making the original knot, it's important that you leave a little tail at the end, as you can see right here, because if you cut off the tail from the first knot, you're not going to have something to wrap around this time when you're making the second knot, and then you pretty much have to start over. So make sure you leave that little tail, and then tie this off as tightly as possible. And I like to tie it just a few times because I'm using a waxed cord, and that could be a little bit slippery. Since I'm using a waxed cord, I just cut the ends off, and then you can sort of just smooth with your fingers, just press it into the other cord. Since it's waxed, it sort of sticks to itself, but if you're using a nylon cording or something that has a tendency to unravel, I would just burn the ends with a match or with a lighter so that it doesn't unravel on you. And as you can see, it's not perfect. I'm not an expert broom maker, but for the most part, we'll be covering all of this up with the flowers, so if you didn't get it perfect, don't worry at all. I've done this several times and it still hasn't come out perfect, which is difficult for my Monica perfectionist self to handle, but it's okay. Now we're going to start on the fun part, the floral decorative element that we're going to be adding to this besom. And if you've watched my floral burning bundle video, you'll know that I always start off with the fresh herbs first. I like to call it the backbone of the bundle, so whether you're using sage, rosemary, whatever more leafy herbal element, I always like to put that down first, and then I start adding in and placing my dried flowers on top, however they look best. I like to put the roses in the very front and these sort of more filler flowers like the baby's breath in the back, and just cut off the stem ends so they're all the same length. And then I like to add in the smaller spray roses next. Whatever flower you're using, if you're using lavender or some smaller flowers, put those in the back and then add the bigger elements right in the front so those pop out. You don't have to use these exact flowers, but these are some of the flowers that I've found that dry the best and that stay together the longest. Rosemary has a tendency to fall apart, but sage, roses, lavender, and some of these filler flowers that have a more dry texture, any flower that has sort of a waxy, dry texture like straw flowers, those last a super long time. But if you're using more of a wet flower that just holds more moisture, they don't tend to hold up as well in these dried bundles. And of course, with time, all flowers fade, so there's a good reason to why you could have wrapped this up in the original twine with the broom, but I decided to wrap that separately than the actual bundle. So if this bundle loses its color and fades after a few months, you can pop it right off the besom and make a new one to place back over, or you can change it up with the seasons. Would be really beautiful for fall to have some more orange colors, some wheat stalks and different things, and then for spring or winter you can switch it up and add some more colorful spring blossoms. That would be such a fun project to do, and something you can constantly be adding your intention and energy into for your altar. Once you have all your flowers laid out exactly how you want them, just like the besom, start off by tying it and then wrapping it around a few times. It's not as important to keep this tight like the broom cord, but just tie it off a few times, wrap it around, and then tie it up, and we're ready to attach it to the besom. And make sure, I didn't mention last time, but make sure to leave the little tail from the knot as well on this one so we can tie it properly. Use the same technique you did to wrap the besom with the floral bundle. Just wrap it around a few times until it feels sturdy enough to you. And what do you guys call it? A besom? I always used to call it a besom, but I guess the proper name is besom. Do you guys ever do that when you don't know how to pronounce something? You sort of just pronounce it however it sounds like in your head, and until you say it out loud, you realize that maybe you're saying it wrong, and when you're making these videos, you sort of have to think about that. Otherwise, somebody will be correcting you in the comments, but I appreciate that. Once you tie off the floral bundle, now your besom is finished. Or wait, or is it finished? Now, the top of this looks a little bit ugly to me, and you could of course leave it like this if it doesn't bother you, but I'm a little bit crazy, so I decided to put a crystal over it just to cover up that knot. And you can use any kind of crystal you want. You could even use another small piece of herb or a cinnamon stick, the selenite, whatever you associate with Samhain or this fall season, anything you like really. But I tried these out. I tried the cinnamon stick, and it's a little too big for my besom, and the selenite is beautiful but also a little bit too large, so I went with this more rounded amethyst druzy piece. This step, of course, is totally optional. You don't have to use a crystal at all. I just think it adds that extra little zing to the besom, and it sort of ties it all in together. The purple matches with the flowers, and of course, as with the floral bundle, you can change it up for the seasons depending on what you like. And I'm just using the same twine to tie it up, but if you wanted to use a hot glue gun or something so you don't see the string over the crystal, you can also do that. And finally, ta-da! Your besom is finished. You can use this broom to energetically cleanse your home, your space, anywhere that you just feel like, instead of using a sage wand or something like that, you can physically use the broom to sweep out the energy. So you can start in the back of a room, open your doors and windows, and just use the broom to sweep over the floor without the bristles even touching the ground, to just sweep that energy out. It is also said that the besom is a symbol of protection, so if you place it over your door, or if you have a larger besom, you can place it propped up in front of your doorway to just protect your home and everything inside of it. Or you could even use this physically on your altar. I know it's supposed to be a more of an energetic tool, but I use it to clean up any mess if I'm making some powders or some witch's salt or anything. If some spills on my altar or my table, I just sweep it up with my besom. But it's up to you, whatever you want to use it for. So if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time. Oh wait, I forgot. I have a small bonus tip. Don't throw away those scraps. Use the same techniques that you used on the larger besom to make these little cute mini ones. How cute are these? You can use these as a garland or place them around your house for Samhain or on your altar all year long. They're super cute. So goodbye guys. See you next time. Thanks for watching.